So, let's start here. Procrastination is hardly a new phenomenon. The Greeks introduced the concept of akrasia, which essentially means acting against your own better judgment. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Even Aristotle wrestled with it, expressing this tension between intention and action.
Wait, so procrastination isn't some digital age problem? Like it's not just because we're glued to our phones or binge watching?
Not at all. It's tempting to blame modern distractions, but the root issue goes much deeper. Akrasia captures this timeless struggle, the disconnect between our present self, who craves immediate comfort, and our future self, who faces the consequences. Behavioral psychologists now refer to this conflict as time inconsistency.
It's fascinating, right? And what really stands out is that procrastination, at its core, isn't just about poor time management. It's emotional self-regulation. That's where many of us get stuck. We delay because it feels easier than confronting discomfort or possible failure.
Hold up. Let me ask, if it's not about managing time, how do we explain that guilt spiral? You know, like when you know you're procrastinating but you still don't stop?
Exactly. That spiral comes from deeper emotional roots. Studies have shown that chronic procrastinators often experience heightened stress and guilt,
which ironically feeds right back into their procrastination. It's cyclical, and I've seen this firsthand. During my VR storytelling years, I observed something called decision paralysis. We were creating these immersive environments, and even seasoned professionals would freeze up, afraid that their work wouldn't meet expectations.
Whoa, so even the experts weren't immune? Sounds like perfectionism rearing its head. You think they were stalling to avoid messing up?
Precisely. It's that fear of negative outcomes that can shut down even the most skilled. And it ties directly to what researchers call procrastination as a self-defeating behavior. It's a defense mechanism, really, protecting oneself from perceived failure by delaying.
but the personalization of that delay is what's so striking. Chronic procrastinators often blame themselves, not because they lack effort, but because they fear their effort won't be enough. And that gets internalized.
You know, I think we've all felt that tension between wanting things to be perfect and just getting out of our own way. Is that what's going on? This emotional tug-of-war?
In a sense, yes, it's a tug-of-war with high stakes. Emotional self-regulation is the key battleground, often a losing one, between intention and execution. And that's where our perfectionism, impulsivity, and even self-doubt come into play most strongly.
One thing we can't ignore is how procrastination tangles itself with deeper emotions. It's not just, I'll do it tomorrow. The truth? It's often perfectionism, impulsivity, or even self-doubt driving those delays.
Yeah, and you're frozen, right? Like you want to start, but you're basically paralyzed by the mental load. I mean, who wouldn't buckle under that?
Precisely. And that paralysis has very real consequences. Psychologically, chronic procrastination can lead to heightened anxiety and depression. Physiologically, the stress factor alone, imagine prolonged tension, can suppress immune functions. It's a heavy toll for what might seem like harmless delay.
Whoa, wait. You're telling me procrastination can actually mess with your health too? Immune suppression? Just because I didn't answer emails on time?
Absolutely. Chronic stress isn't picky. It starts small but compounds. And when you're locked in that cycle of procrastination, it doesn't take long for effects to spill over into other areas. Missed deadlines aren't the only cost. Relationships can fray. Physical health deteriorates. It's all connected.
And that connection often starts with how we perceive action or inaction. It's personal. We delay, not because we're lazy or indifferent, but because action feels risky. And to make it worse, the guilt and self-criticism, those pile on, undermining our confidence to even begin.
You know, it's funny, or maybe not funny, but that perfect storm really resonates. Like whenever I'd pitch a screenplay, I'd tweak it, then tweak it again. And again. Until it was just too late. Zero pitch, zero chance. I was basically sabotaging myself.
That sabotage is so relatable. In martial arts, there's a saying, hesitation kills. When I practiced Hapkido, every move demanded total focus, zero hesitation. My instructor had to break me down, those fears, uncertainties, before I could rebuild. I learned this. Sometimes the only way out is to act, intentionally and fearlessly.
I love that. But obviously, not all of us are black belts in crushing perfectionism. How do we actually get fearless in, regular stuff?
Well, fear isn't the enemy, it's hesitation. Courage to act, even imperfectly, begins with accepting that perfection usually isn't necessary. I've coached photographers who were their own worst critics, obsessing over perfect shots. My advice? Shoot first. Refine later. Action itself disrupts the self-doubt loop.
Exactly. And when you start to see action this way, a choice rather than an obligation, it changes everything. Whether it's writing that screenplay or small daily goals, it's about reframing effort not as a verdict on your worth, but as a step toward progress.
Hearing all this, it kind of makes me think about one specific moment. I'd been dodging this pitch meeting for weeks, and I mean weeks. I kept telling myself, it's not ready yet,
Classic, right? What finally changed for you?
Well, I came across this idea of temptation bundling. I made myself this deal: only listen to my favorite playlist while working on the pitch deck. I'm serious, suddenly it didn't feel like such a grind. It was, honestly, kind of fun.
That's temptation bundling in action. It's brilliant, really. When you pair something enjoyable with a task you're avoiding, it creates immediate rewards for tasks that usually lack them. And neuroscience shows it works because our present self thrives on those tiny hits of gratification.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of the broader concept we touched on earlier, engaging your future self. I like to think of tools like habit trackers or even just marking a calendar. It's visual proof of progress. And honestly, celebrating small wins? Game changer.
Yeah, but isn't that the trick? Like getting started in the first place? Some projects just feel like boulders, immovable.
Totally. That's where the 2-minute rule comes in. Break the boulder down. Ask yourself, what's the absolute smallest version of this that I can tackle right now? Then just focus on that.
Oh, I've done this. It's like, okay, write one line. And you kind of trick yourself into momentum, right?
Exactly. It's a form of psychological priming. Momentum, once it builds, carries through. And this links wonderfully to commitment devices, a strategy where you pre-commit to something, locking your future self into following through. It's like paying for a gym membership in advance. You'll feel compelled to go.
Or telling someone about your goal. Accountability transforms plans into promises, especially when made to someone you respect. It's an intentional way of aligning your actions with purpose.
Speaking of intentionality, I got to bring up the intention pen. It seemed simple at first, like, okay, it's a fancy pen, but wow. Just having that reminder in my hand, like a physical cue, helped me stay focused. My client said the same thing. It was that tiny nudge.
I love that. It's like a ritual, right? Writing with a purpose, connecting it to your intent. And maybe that's the heart of it. Procrastination loses its grip when we act, even in small, meaningful ways. It's about intentional living.
Indeed. And as we wrap this up, here's what it boils down to. Procrastination isn't a permanent trait. It's a habit we can outgrow, step by intentional step. Whether through bundling rewards, reframing challenges, or activating your future self, each action reclaims a bit of your time, your energy, your narrative.
And that's something everyone deserves. To live intentionally, to feel empowered. So, start small. Start somewhere. The point is, just start.
On that note, hey, let's call it. Great talking, you two. And to everyone listening, Go out there and do the thing. We're rooting for you.